Hi and welcome to the Book Bar, where everything bookish is on the menu. I'm Anjanette Barr. I am an author. I am an aspiring literary agent, and I work for an editing company called Blue Pen. This channel is mostly about books, but every once in a while I want to come on and talk a little bit about writing as well. So today is going to be a Writer's Hour video all about the different types of editing. My channel is called The Book Bar because I always try and pair a drink with my books, and since we're not talking about any specific books today, I am just tagging on to a couple of other videos that I made today, so you'll notice same outfit, and just enjoying some citrus ginger tea from Tea Drops, and there is a discount code in the description below. If you like tea, check that out. So you have done all of the hard work of writing a book, you have your manuscript ready, and you're not sure if it still needs more work, so maybe you give it to some friends and they all come back with mostly positive things and good job, you did something awesome, and you want to make sure that it's the best that it can be before you send it off to an agent as a query or before you self-publish. So you start to think about, maybe I need an editor, but as a new author, you may or may not know what the different types of editing available to you are, and it can get a little confusing since writers are not necessarily editors and vice versa. You may not have a background in editing, and certainly if it's your first book, you probably don't know the lingo of the industry. So I'm just going to break down the main types of editing and talk about which ones are which and when you might need them and who might be able to skip them. The first type of editing that most authors need on their manuscript is called developmental editing. You may hear it called concept editing, or even sometimes it'll be in a package like book coaching or author coaching. But what developmental editing is that high-level look at your book, at the structure of your book, and at the characters if it's fiction, and other large-level things like the overall voice of the book, the dialogue in general, things like how you've organized your chapters, especially for nonfiction. That could make your message a lot more or less clear. Things like, did you need to elaborate more on this scene? Did it go by too quickly? So pacing. Developmental editing looks at all of those macro issues and does not get into the nitty-gritty details of grammar and syntax. So you want to do developmental editing before you get to that very specific editing. So even if you feel like you're nervous about your grammar or even your punctuation or your spelling, you start with a developmental edit, unless you are just sure that it's how you want it to be. And some people can get away with not doing a developmental edit for several reasons. One could be that they're part of a writing critique group and you've got a lot of other experienced writers who are really hashing this out with you and figuring out what you can improve as you're writing. And especially if you're not a first-time writer, if you've written many books, you may have a feel for how this should go, or you may be particularly good at the structure issues, and maybe just a little pass over by your beta readers or your agent or another writer friend will get you what you need without paying for a full developmental edit. However, a developmental edit is an excellent resource for both fiction and nonfiction writers who just need to make sure that everything that they have on their page makes sense and is arranged in the best way possible. Because developmental editing is expensive, it's usually one of the more expensive options in the editing realm because it does take someone who can really look at those issues and articulate to you what needs to change and what's good and bad. So someone who's really experienced and does have an eye for those things. If that's not in your budget, or if you don't need a full developmental edit but you still want some help, there are other things like critiques or beta reads that you can pay for or sometimes get for free that are the same sort of thing, but much shorter, much more condensed. So, for instance, a developmental edit will often mean that you receive line comments in your manuscript, usually with track changes, or back before we had so many options, editors would actually write on the printed page of your manuscript with like specific thoughts, and then you'll get an editorial letter that could be 7 to 10 pages of ideas and looking at each issue point by point. So that's developmental editing. A critique would just be that letter and probably not 7 to 10 pages. It would just be the person reads your manuscript, tells you their overall opinion on those high-level things, and maybe gives you a couple of examples. Maybe they say something like, you have a tendency to hop around between perspectives in the middle of a chapter, like in this section, and it would be easier for us to follow along if you stuck with one person longer. Or maybe they'll say to you, you have a really uneven pacing and some of your sections whiz by really quickly, and then you spend, chapters and chapters describing the scene of the same importance in a very slow way, and they may suggest that you think about evening out your pacing. It's things like that they'll say, but in 4 pages probably, right? So that's a critique. Sometimes a beta reader is just a friend or a critique partner who's also a writer, would give you similar feedback. So similar type of editing, but not the full edit that you would get as from paying for a developmental edit. And then the other type of edit that you will be familiar with is the copy edit or the line edit. You do hear terms thrown around and used interchangeably. So if you are looking at hiring an editor, just make sure you know exactly what they're going to do before you hire them. But a line edit is looking at line by line, and that's the copy edit as well usually. The line edit is looking at your grammar, your syntax, your punctuation, your spelling, and then also they could be looking at things like, inflammatory topics. Maybe they say, that word that you keep using is not exactly looked upon favorably anymore. So maybe you would want to change it for this, because sometimes writers don't even know that a word that they're using is offensive. So a line editor might tell you that. It just depends. It depends on the line editor. Other examples might be that a line editor might catch things that you make mistakes on that aren't necessarily grammar, but maybe you called your person Alicia at the beginning, and then halfway through you start calling her Alyssa. Sorry, my dog's barking. I'm gonna go take care of that. What is it? Do you want up here? Up. Okay, come on, up. Do you want up here? You want up here? Come here. Come here. Up. Okay. Okay. Do you want to look at the camera? Yeah. Do you want to say hi? Look over here. Over here. You gonna go lay down? Yeah. Okay. So, yes, a line edit is going to look at all of those things to make sure that you look professional and polished and that you don't have a lot of mistakes that look distracting. They may also do things like double check your timeline, things like that, but it's not going to be the high level that that developmental editing is, and so you need to start with developmental, and then once it's as good as you can get it, you go to line editing to make sure that the final product looks very polished. And then the final step in editing, if you need one more check over everything, is proofreading. So you can hire a proofreader. Say that you hired a line editor and then you made some more changes, but you don't want to have a whole line edit again. Say you hired a line editor and you feel like they did a pretty good job, but you're still unsure. You think they may have missed some things, or say you have a really large manuscript and you just feel like you want one more set of eyes to go through it to make sure there aren't any mistakes. That's what a proofreader does. A proofreader goes through and looks at not story elements and things like that, but just make sure that all the I's are dotted and all the T's are crossed. And that's usually your cheapest option. But again, you don't get the expertise of someone who can edit your grammar, and you won't get someone who is really skilled at looking at dialogue, character development, plot, and pacing. So my best advice to you is to have editing done as much as you can, as much as you can afford. Don't skimp on it, and make sure that you know what you're paying for before you pay for it. Don't hesitate to ask lots of questions if you're considering a company whose website isn't clear, or who you're in conversation with and you're not sure what exactly they mean by the terms they're using. And definitely get recommendations from other people if you can. Look at their testimonials page, or better yet, talk to writers that you know who have already used certain editors and were pleased with them. But I feel really strongly about all of us writers doing our best to put our best out there, and recognizing that we can't be the best at everything. And so go ahead and utilize that team of creative people in the world, and make sure that you present your ideas in the most organized and lovely way that they can be presented, with the help of people who are better at grammar and other things than you are, or with the help of a second set of eyes, because we all start to just get jumbled ideas when we're looking at the same words over and over again. So I hope that was helpful. Leave me a comment and tell me if you have any other questions about editing, and also if you've had a really great or really bad experience with editing. Leave that in the comments, and other people will be able to read and benefit from your experience. And if you do need help and advice for finding an editor, my contact information is in the description below. You can contact me either at my personal website, anjanettebarr.com, or through Blue Pen Books, which is where I work. So happy writing, and I'll see you on the next episode of The Writer's Hour, or here at the Book Bar on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss anything. Thanks.